Good afternoon, parents. I hope you're all safe and well, and welcome to this next session in a series of online information sessions and webinars for parents. Today we will be speaking about online safety. As always, I'm joined by Miss Gurpreet Dhaliwal, our Senior Deputy Head of Secondary, and together we will be presenting information and also managing the live event question and answer box, and making sure that we do respond to any questions that you may have this afternoon. Just a reminder, as always, these sessions are recorded and will be uploaded to our social media sites, should you wish to watch them back or should you wish to watch them for the first time. So today's session is about online safety, something that is incredibly important both in school and outside of school, and something that is certainly becoming more and more important in our daily lives as technology systems are enhanced, are increased, and the access to information to students, to parents, to teachers around the world is growing and growing day by day. So today's session really is to focus on various aspects of online safety, looking at the different types of devices students use both in school and outside of school, and some ideas and thoughts that you may wish to consider and to discuss with your child or children at home about this, to share some of the challenges we face as a school and some of the strategies we are using to address them. And throughout this session, obviously, if you do want to raise anything in the chat that maybe challenges you are facing from home, we certainly will try to address them with all parents. But if they are very specific or individual and you do not wish us to share them, just please note that, and we can have a conversation after this session or in a separate phone call or Zoom or Teams chat with you. So, as always, the next slide, please. If you're not familiar, I just want to obviously remind you about our vision. We always use this as sort of a reference point to where we're at as a school, linking these sessions to these three key words. And obviously, in terms of online safety, technology can allow students to grow, flourish and succeed in many ways if used appropriately and if used sensibly by our school community. And these three words in terms of education, really we need to consider various aspects of how we educate and how we teach and how we nurture our students to be responsible citizens both in school and online, allowing them to flourish. Next slide, please. And again, thinking about the three pillars and how it links to online safety, obviously some of the key things that we need to consider here in terms of character, especially. Students are living in a digital world where character becomes incredibly important, and students have got to be aware that they experience things in person and online, and there's different ways to challenge certain behaviours, to embrace certain things, and therefore character becomes a really important aspect of this topic, and we'll talk about that as we go through this session. So the first thing I'd like to talk to you about today, next slide please, is the different devices and the different access students have to content online. And I'll try to relate all of this back to the challenges we face as a school, and also share the positives of what we've done and what is working in the school as well. So mobile phones, as we all know, have developed rapidly over the past 10 years. From devices that were simply used to make a telephone call to devices that can now be used for lots of different purposes. And predominantly in school or in schools around the world, usually speaking, most children do possess a mobile phone. Now, pre-COVID, the rules were very clear at GEMS Founders School that students were not permitted to use mobile phones in school. As we entered the pandemic, the structure of learning, the online, and then blended learning model has really forced students around the world to use more technology. And also, in addition to that, it's not just about the education and the lessons, it's also about being able to contact parents as well. So we as a school have a very clear stance on mobile phones, and that they are allowed to be brought into school by students, but only for certain purposes. They should certainly not be carrying them around using them during break times or during transition times, and only as a last resort, or if the teacher instructs students, are they permitted to use mobile phones during lessons. After school, students may use their mobile phones to contact their parents, and obviously with the multiple arrangements now for pickup, they are permitted after school. But what does that mean? What does that mean at home? What does that mean in school? I guess the first conversation from a parental perspective is to decide whether or not you buy and purchase and allow your child or children to possess a phone, and what type of phone that is. And sometimes, the pressure on parents is incredibly, it's enormous, because children will go home and they'll want the new phones, the most recent updated phones, the most recent phones in the market. And I think we always have to sort of recenter ourselves and bring it back to that question: why do you want to get a phone? For what reason? What purpose? And I think that conversation is a really important one, and it's perhaps one that we sometimes overlook, or maybe just skip to the next steps, assuming that all students want a phone. So actually have that meaningful dialogue about why do you want to have a mobile phone with you on your person. Is it to contact your friends? Is it for social media purposes? Is it for gaming? All things that we're going to talk about through this session. And then perhaps dig obviously deeper with some of the following questions about what you like about using your phone, and search a little bit beyond that very basic question. Now, you will structure as parents these questions in different ways according to the age, obviously, of your child, and that's where the tricky part comes in for parents, finding that right balance between respecting privacy and the fact that teenagers do want and do need privacy, but also making sure that we as parents do monitor this closely, because they're not adults just yet, and as we all know, the challenges that mobile phones can present are monumental. So ask the question: why do you want to get a phone? And then why do you like, or what do you like about using your phone? And that conversation can then open up a lot of different avenues into the different apps, the different types of functions, the different the different reasons as to why students really want and like using mobile phones. So then obviously that the next step is to really think about what happens if students, if your child or you suspect other children are misusing a mobile telephone. Now, there's lots of ways we can tackle this. We first of all must understand we have to tackle it together. We as a school simply cannot monitor individually every child's mobile phone. We have very good systems, obviously in the school, across the GEMS network, which prevents students from using certain websites or gaining access to certain areas online. However, students are very clever, and they will, in some cases, try to find out ways of bypassing certain filters and protective systems, and that's for the school to deal with. And in many cases, we find out about such cases through our parents, through other students, and we tackle them obviously individually, and we tackle them very seriously. But it's about that dialogue between school and home. And if you are concerned or want to raise a concern about something that you have noticed or that your child has told you about, it's very important that the school knows as well, because quite often what is happening outside of school can lead to things being brought into school with specific reference to mobile phones and their use to gain information online. But we should never forget about the positive things about mobile phones and technology in general, about how it's connected the world and how it connects us to one another, and obviously the benefits that had for us as we entered the pandemic. So we want to work with families, and if you look at the very bottom bullet point, and you'll see a common trend and theme running throughout this presentation. It's often a good idea for you as a parent to consider a family agreement, and that could be in various shapes and forms, in which you sit down with your family and you talk about what is right, what is wrong, and you have different points that you are all going to agree on as to how you as a family use mobile phones. Because we also have to talk about adults here and their use of mobile phones. As a society, I think we've become obsessed by our devices. Certainly when I go out at the weekend, or I'm in the mall, or wherever I am in a shopping centre, I often pay close attention to how many people, both young people and adults, are on their phones, their mobile phones, and how distracted they are from what is actually happening in and around wherever they are. So a family agreement, whether it's such basic things as making sure that your children and your family are not using their mobile phones when they're having dinner together, or if you have a certain period of time where you will not allow your child to use their phone, it could be a good idea to consider having that as a family agreement as well. I certainly, you know, my daughter is only 4.5 years old, but is she being exposed to technology at school? Absolutely. Does she like it? Absolutely. And I've got to be very strict as a parent as well, even at that very tender and young age of 4.5, to make sure that my daughter understands that there are times, which is most of the time, that she cannot use her device, or a device, sorry, in this case it's an iPad, obviously not a mobile phone. So please consider that, and talking, sitting around the dinner table, or sitting around and having that conversation as to the expectations, the rules that you as a family are going to have. In school, I can assure you that on the corridors, our staff challenge students who are carrying mobile phones, as in are using them when they shouldn't be, and they are asked to put them away during transition times, like I said before. But also, like I said as well, embracing, should a child need to use a mobile phone because he or she has maybe forgot their device, their other device, or whether it's just to take perhaps photographs of the lesson objectives or whatever it may be. These devices are purposeful and can be used productively as long as students are obviously educated from school and from home, and that we make sure that it's reinforced what is expected in school when students get home. So I hope that's clear about mobile phones, and that we will continue to work closely together in monitoring this. Next slide, please. So 3, I suppose, top tips here. And obviously, like I said, this session is recorded, so it will be shared, so you can take a little time about considering these. But that keyword about responsibility and talking about frequency of use, when students use it, the time limits, where and when devices can be used, and so on and so forth. And like I said, as children get older into teenage years and adolescence and then into young adulthood, they as parents, it becomes, I think, even more challenging to give your child or children freedom and privacy, whilst at the same time having concerns and making sure that you're able to talk openly. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the younger your child is, or when a child first gets a mobile phone, or when you decide to buy them a mobile phone, I think the younger and the earlier you have these conversations and set those family expectations and agreements, the better it can be as they move through these very, very challenging years. So talking about the strategies as well about what happens if your child is experiencing something that they're uncomfortable with when it comes to their mobile phone. Now that could be lots of different things, but largely it stems from online behaviors. Making sure that they have quick strategies to be able to lock their phones, to make sure that they don't share their passwords, all of the security issues that sometimes again we overlook and assume that students know or young children know, but reinforcing those, repeating those, changing passwords and passcodes frequently is very important. Many students that I speak to actually leave their phones unlocked, which is something I find quite interesting. And obviously, I always speak to them about the dangers of doing so. And then obviously exploring the parental controls that and the functions that most mobile phones have on them these days, and making sure that again you can have somewhat control over what your child accesses on a day-to-day basis. I think another thing that I talk to teenagers a lot about is using the screen time data to actually monitor how often they are, how much time they spend staring at their screens. And again, this can apply to mobile phones, iPads, computers, laptops, whatever it may be. But I think actually sitting down at the end of each week and looking at some hard data that may suggest when and what times and what days even perhaps your child is using their mobile phone the most. So please, with all that in mind, think about the next conversation you may have with not just your child but with your family. Next slide, please. We then move on to laptops. Again, large majority of students have their own laptop these days, and obviously a laptop brings with it different challenges, different benefits than mobile phones. And there's lots of different things here that we need to consider when it comes to being safe online, and just to be safe in school as well. Again, it's those basic questions that I said about mobile phones, about actually establishing why do they want a laptop, perhaps over an iPad or vice versa, and actually finding out what benefits they're going to gain from their laptops. We find in school that our older students tend to want to use laptops more. We tend to find they're more beneficial as they start writing essays and need to need to do a lot more writing and typing, and obviously a laptop is more accessible than perhaps an iPad, for certain subjects. And then again, investigating about the favorite thing to do on the laptops, because in obviously lots of different ways they're very similar to mobile phones, but when it comes to actually use, students may wish to use laptops over their mobile devices is at home. So talk about the purpose again, please, and talk about all of the challenges. And like I said at the start, consider again that family agreement about laptop time as well. So you can actually categorize this family agreement into different devices if you wish. Again, most students that I speak to either have a mobile phone and a laptop, or a mobile phone and an iPad, or some kind of tablet. So it's not just one device we have to consider these days. It's multiple devices, and again that brings with it several different challenges, not just in terms of online safety, but just actual looking after their device, their physical device, that they carry around with them most of their days. So please think about that. Next slide, please, Miss Mylene. And consider some of these sort of tips in terms of how you can have a meaningful conversation at home. And think about some of these following ideas. Think about the location of the laptop. This is a really interesting one. Where do your children study at home? Is there a study room? Is it in their bedroom? Is it in an open space where it can be monitored? And again, trying to think about what is right for you, for the age of your children, and thinking about what's right for your family. Again, if I cast my mind back to when I was a child growing up, we did have a computer at home, but it was in the living room, and access to that computer was for the family. We didn't have laptops, but actually, when you go back to those very, very basics, that really helped my family to manage myself and my brother in terms of just the time spent and actually observe what we were doing and talk about what we were doing. Because I think sometimes we often assume that when children are on their devices, they could be getting up to no good, but actually a lot of the time students are using them very, very productively and positively. And I've seen it on numerous occasions in our school, setting up little study groups, whether that is via social media or different communication platforms, or whether that's just to organize their work in on their laptops or whatever it may be. So I think the more open we are with our families and with our children, and with other families as well, and perhaps you want to work with your children's friends' families, and set up small groups and communities where it can become very powerful in terms of things such as study groups, so that you can actually not only share the positives of this, but actually share your concerns as a group. So please consider that. And obviously the other thing is about the exploration of parental controls, again very different in some ways than mobile telephones, and perhaps in some ways more powerful as well on laptops. Next slide, please. The next thing we talk about, and again, it's become a huge industry, gaming. We were only last week, we're talking about this whole new esports culture, where students are, and adults for that matter, are gaming online. Whereas years ago, it was just, you may be playing a game, but it would just be your computer screen, and it would be within the four walls of your house. Now students can connect to other people around the world, which is very, very worrying for a parent. People that they've never met, people that they've never seen, people that they don't know. and they are communicating openly with people online to game against, or whatever it may be. So there are multiple risks and dangers and concerns associated just with that very concept that we need to talk to our children about. Go back to why. Why do you want to get a games console? Is it just because you want to play a game, or is it because you want to play a game online with others? What types of games are students involved in? Making sure that you as parents are very firm and set very clear expectations of the age restrictions of these games and the content that is in these games, and familiarizing yourself before they are purchased. Because like I said, again, throughout this conversation, this presentation, there are multiple thousands of games out there that are not appropriate, completely inappropriate for young people. However, do millions of young people play them across the world? Yes, they absolutely do. So we can only control, we can't control that wider society. It's just not possible. We have to control what's happening in our houses, in our schools, as much as we possibly can. So please think about, before you purchase a physical game for a gaming console or device, the age restrictions, the content, the graphics, the nature of it, but also going back to the point about laptops and mobile phones, thinking about all the apps that are now games as well, and thinking about how you're going to monitor and talk about what is actually on your child's device. Have those open and honest and frank conversations about the content, please, of gaming and of games. There are thousands, of course, educational games and games that can be very powerful to support with students' learning. And it's finding, I think, that right balance as a parent, and again, setting up that family agreement to help establish rules. Again, I can only refer to what I do at home with my daughter, and she has lots and lots of different educational games that are installed on our iPad at home and on a laptop. Games that can help develop language. She's currently learning Dutch and English and Arabic and French, and games like that can be so powerful in supporting what is actually happening at school, or whether it's counting games or whatnot. So think about that as well, about that right balance between gaming for fun and gaming for educational purposes, and finding that right, that right place for you to be as a family through the conversations that you will have at home. Next slide, please, Ms. Marlene. I've already talked about the age and about the rapidly developing technology where students do have access not just to game against one person, but against millions of people in big gaming competitions, and we should embrace that. This is an amazing opportunity if again managed correctly, and if managed in a way that protects the safety of your child. So think about, again, where is that games console in the house? Where do you position it? Do you monitor what is happening, or are you not aware? And I think that's something that each family has to consider when they set up that family agreement and talk about it openly with their children. If things are concerning you or worrying you, again, that open dialogue, not just with your child or children, but if appropriate with the school, to see if we can see trends as well, with other families, again, if appropriate. And again, I'm talking about setting up small communities of families as well here. That can be a very, very productive way of dealing with this and embracing it at the same time. So lots to consider with just three sort of very simple devices: mobile phones, laptops, and gaming consoles. I mean, there's lots more devices out there, and like I said, a lot of students will have access to all three, if not more. So we've got to be really careful as to what actual physical devices students have, and more importantly, how they're being used in different ways. And the conversations at home are absolutely critical at a young age. What I have definitely seen over the past 10 years is that students accessing online material has got younger and younger and younger and younger. And this is again, very, very concerning. But at the same time, if managed correctly and appropriately, can really unlock a lot of powerful learning. You know, we talk a lot about access to online information. And if you think about it in terms of a secondary school, we ask students to research things in Google or any of the search engines frequently, both in school and at home. But actually, what students really have to think about is the information that they're getting back from these searches. Is it accurate? Is it valid? And again, to have these conversations at home about, you simply just can't put something in Google and assume that what you get back is accurate and factual information. So talking to your children about this wealth of information that they have, and the validity of it and the reliability of it is really important. And what also springs to my mind is talking to children about all of this bit-sized information that they receive on not just on a day-to-day basis, but on an hour-to-hour and a minute-to-minute basis. Just thinking about what children and adults are exposed to, whether it's a WhatsApp message or a Facebook notification or something that's on Netflix or whatever it may be. Students and adults in society have been bombarded by bit-sized information, which is very difficult for people to process. So, you know, it's really important to have that conversation just in itself about what damage that can do if we're not careful. And we often forget and overlook that, you know, the use of devices is really dominating much of our lives these days. So even if you're, like I said, if you're in the mall or you're at the shopping centre or you're wherever you are, just to encourage your children and your family to pay attention to what your surroundings are, and just to actually step back for a second and look at how obsessed we have become as a human race with technology, and to actually put this into context for a second and start to, in some cases, go back to basics. I think this is really, really important in our lives, not to forget the importance of actually just picking up a book and reading. So finding that balance is something that you must continue to discuss as a family, and we will certainly discuss that as a school community. Next slide, please. So again, just a few little tips for you to consider. Again, with those parental controls, again, like I've talked about, the location of these devices in your house, and actually not being frightened to say to your child, turn your screen off and sit down and let's have a conversation. And actually, sometimes that's what it takes. And having that frank and open conversation with them, in line with the rules and the rules that you have in your household. So we find out lots and lots and lots every day in school as school leaders about what devices are being used for, how they're being used in school. Like I said, students are always one step ahead, or many students are always one step ahead of the systems that are put in place, and trying to bypass certain systems and find new ways of getting around. So we need to know about these things if they're happening at home. We 9 out of 10 times find out about them in school very quickly if they are reported to us, and we deal with them accordingly. So please continue to support us with that and have those same conversations, and actually reinforce our digital responsibility use policy that you can find on our website. Go through it and talk about each of those points at home with your child, please. Next slide. Finally, the wonderful world of social media, which is, it's at the very heart of everything that teenagers, adults do these days. Whether it's any one of those social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, you name it, it's dominating. It's central to everything we do. And like I said, for every negative about social media, there's a positive. Sharing the amazing things that are happening, providing really useful links and informative information, and really connecting people around the world. But some of the things we have faced just this academic year are some really inappropriate challenges that students have been set online through social media platforms such as TikTok, and looking through these sorts of challenges that students want to get involved in. It baffles me as a human being and as a school leader, but at the same time it's real, and it is happening, and we need to be one step ahead of the game. So actually, as parents going out there onto social media platforms and thinking about what the trends are across not only whether it be at the school level, but at the country level, or whether it's at the global level, there's different trends that are constantly appearing, and we need to read about them and share with one another. What is out there, both the positive and obviously the negative. So in terms of social media, the one single conversation that we need to keep having with children, which again is very different from when I grew up as a young person, is that whatever students are doing online now, they do leave some form of digital footprint, where more often than not you can trace back to what students have done online, and therefore I think that's a really good starting point. About things are documented very differently than they were perhaps in the past. And again, talking to your children about the age limits, the age restrictions, that each of these social media platforms has, is really important, especially with reference to my point about younger and younger people. The trends are that younger and younger people are using social media. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So I guess find out what social media platforms your child or children are involved in. Have that dialogue about online reputation, digital footprints, and then it really has to be the responsibility of the parent to monitor your child's social media profile. One thing that I always notice whenever I speak to students who perhaps have not used social media appropriately is that, once one group closes down, another group will open up, whether that's a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group or an Instagram group or a Snapchat group, and there'll be constantly more and more and more. So actually thinking about asking that question, why? Why do you want to actually be a part of that group? Is there a purpose? What is the purpose? Is it to be part of challenges, or is it to be part of a study group? And thinking about what each of these social media platforms can do productively in terms of education, and the other things that could be damaging perhaps. I'm working with a group of students who have set up social media study groups, and are using it very powerfully to work with one another online in the evenings and on the weekends, and that has brought them closer together in the very best interest of their learning, whether it's to study for an IGCSE exam, or whether it's to prepare for a test, or whether it's to work on a project together. It can be very, very powerful. So please do consider all of that as you have your next conversation. As a school, we constantly talk about this with students, whether it's at the class level, whether it's at an assembly level, whether it's during character education. It all links into this very important of young people's lives, and it's very, very hard sometimes to keep a very close eye on what students' social media profile is. It really is, from a school perspective and from a parental perspective. So if we raise concerns or we see concerns, we will contact you, and I am asking, as the head of secondary, please, that if you do see concerns or you want to raise concerns, please raise them with us, because quite often what we find is that there are trends both in school and outside of school. So with all of that in mind, I hope this session has been helpful. I don't see any questions that have been posted so far in the chat, so I can't really answer anything specifically there. But if you do have questions, please do send them through to us, to either myself or Ms. Geoffrey, or the head of year, or your child's form tutor. This website I have to reference because most of this is taken from there. It's also in our policy online. A very, very useful website, saferinternet.org UK. And if you want to use that again as a reference point, it's just one of millions of websites that you can go to as a parent. But I thought this one was very succinct, and it provided some very specific advice and guidance as to how you can best support your child or children at home. Thank you very much. We will be back next week with the next in our series of these webinars. Next week we have Understanding High Performance Learning, or HPL, and then finally we have Pathways into Higher Education, whether that's for a Year 7 child or a Year 13 child. We will be talking about the different pathways and the routes into higher education. After the winter break, we will launch a brand new series of webinars for parents. Please feedback if these, the timing 12 p.m. works for you or it doesn't work for you. But as always, they are recorded and shared, so you can always access them whenever you wish. It's always nice if you can post some comments in the chat as well. That's always lovely. Thank you for the person who, or the people, sorry, now the people who are commenting. Thank you for the useful webinar. Really appreciate that feedback, and thank you very much for your very, very positive words. Together, we will keep working and in the very best interests of our children, your children, being safe online. Take care, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you next week at the same time. Goodbye, everybody.